I'm out here in Durango, Colorado, and I literally can't believe the views, like the mountains and the sunsets and the river. Like it's just one of the most beautiful and magical places I've ever been, and some of the most beautiful and magical things I've ever seen. And funnily enough, like it's not the only beautiful place I've seen. Like I've been to a place called Banff up in Canada. It's another unbelievable, beautiful, mountainous, snowy environment. I remember being there and just thinking how beautiful it was. And I remember standing on the top of Table Mountain in Cape Town, South Africa, looking over the sea. I remember being in Lake Tahoe and taking a ski lift. And I don't even ski, but I took this ski lift up to the top of this mountain and overlooked this beautiful lake. And when I see things like that, I just marvel at like the beauty that was created, and we get to enjoy it and marvel at it and see its beauty. But I also always remember that I almost never saw any of it. I was going to take my life. Without question, the biggest contributor that led to my very, very dark state of mind growing up was the relationship I had with my father. My father was a very angry and unpredictable man. My father was his anger and abuse and physical way of parenting created a massive amount of anxiety and depression within me. Like I was afraid to come home. I was afraid to talk to him. I was afraid for him to catch me doing anything wrong. In order to protect myself, I started to lie to just keep myself safe. And then I became afraid that he would discover the truth amongst whatever lie it was. And the lies were things like, did you have homework today? And I would say no, because I knew if I told him I did have homework, then he would be upset. He would want to like look at my homework, and it didn't really matter. If my homework was perfect, he'd find something to be upset about and something to attack me about. So I would lie and I say I didn't have homework, and I lived with this constant fear that he would find out I in fact did have homework or things like that. Like it was so terrible. And what made it really, really bad is I remember learning that on a college campus, you could live in a dorm room, and that became my goal. Like I wanted to live in a dorm room so I can get away from the home. Like the dorm room was going to be the first place I lived outside of the home, thus away from my father, and thus safe. So no matter how bad things got, I had this like hope that like it's really bad here, and I'm anxious and I'm depressed and I have all this fear, but if I can just get to there, I'll be out of this home and I will be safe. And the darkest time happened when I successfully did. I got into college and I moved into a college dorm room. And before I went, I'll never forget this day. I didn't realize it at the time, but this was the day that things began to get really dark for me. My father actually drove me to my college campus. And I remember he took me out to eat. We went to some restaurant. And then he took me to a local pharmacy kind of convenience store, and he bought some toiletries and things for me to have in my dorm room. And then I got a beeper. And I didn't know it at the time, but the beeper was a method of torment. The beeper would go off, and some of you might not be old enough to remember, but a beeper used to be a device. You could call a number, and the beeper would beep to the recipient of the number you called. It was a little thing you had in your pocket or on your hip or wherever, and you call this number, and the beeper would show the number that called, and then you would call the person back. So my father would beat me constantly, and I'd have to call him back, and if I didn't call him back fast enough, he would yell and scream, and if I didn't call him back at all, he'd drive 2.5 hours to my campus and find me and just torment me and embarrass me in front of my peers. And I realized that he had figured out a way to continue my torment even though I was out of the home. And that thought removed hope. I remember very much believing, like, if moving out of the house didn't make any difference, I don't know that anything will make a difference. I very clearly remember thinking, there's no way out of this. And that thought is what led to me having a genuine desire to take my life, because I did not see a way out of the situation I was in. When I talk about this and I think about that stage of my life, it wasn't something I was thinking about. It was like I had decided I was going to take my life. I remember, like, at that time, this was in the 90s, in the area I was living in, Massachusetts. At that time, there weren't a whole lot of fast food restaurants. I remember, like, McDonald's was around and stuff like that. Wasn't a whole lot of fast food restaurants. And in this shopping plaza very close to my house, there was some construction happening, and then eventually they put up a sign that said "Future Home of Taco Bell," and everyone was so excited. I mean, I was 17 at the time, and we were all super excited, or everybody in the area was all crazy excited that this Taco Bell was going to be in the area. And I wasn't excited at all, because I knew that I was not going to live to see the completion of the Taco Bell construction. Like, that's how, like, decided I was that I was going to take my life. But what changed everything was completely unexpected. I remember laying in my dorm room, knowing that I only had weeks to live. I knew exactly what I was going to do and how I was going to do it. I hadn't really decided on when, but I knew it was soon. I remember laying in my dorm room knowing there wasn't a lot of time, and I wasn't really going to class, because what's the point? I'm not going to be here very long. I'm just laying in my dorm room taking a nap. And for whatever reason, I started thinking about my funeral. And as I laid in bed thinking about that funeral, I thought about my friends speaking at my funeral, and all of them saying, "We didn't realize Elliott was struggling in this way. We didn't realize Elliott was so depressed. We didn't realize Elliott was so broken. Elliott was so sad. Elliott was so weak." Like, I just kept hearing them say, "We didn't realize Elliott was so such and such." And that thought was super unsettling to me, because what I wanted them to say was, "We didn't realize Elliott's father was so difficult." My dad was a really charming man, and a lot of my friends thought he was great, but behind closed doors, he was beating the shit out of me and my brothers. And that was like the secret. And I wanted them to, like, not blame me for this tragedy. I wanted them to blame him. And I remember, and I mean, it's a dark time in my life, man. I'm really going through it. And I remember getting out of the bed and realizing that if I want people to know the truth, then I have to outlive this pain so that I could tell the story. And in the same way that the day I got that beeper was like the worst day of my life, I didn't realize at the time, but this was the best day of my life, and I didn't realize it at the time, because once I realized I had to outlive this pain, I had reintroduced hope into my life. And I now had to believe two things. Number one, I had to believe that there was a day after the pain. And number two, I had to believe I was capable of getting there. I was capable of getting through this difficulty and getting to that day. So just literally the desire to outlive my pain meant I had to believe in those two things. There'd be a day after the pain, and I was strong enough to get through it. And I very clearly, I mean, I can remember this like it was yesterday. I remember thinking, I don't have to not take my life. I can just not take my life today and keep seeing if I can get to the day where where the pain is gone, and I don't have to be strong enough to get through all of this. I just have to be strong enough to get through today. And if I can keep doing that, then I can see what the other side of this is. And even if I didn't like the other side of this, or if I didn't like the future, I could take my life then. And that changed everything for me. I started making decisions that put me in line with making it on the other side of this pain. I started making decisions that got me to where I was trying to get. I started taking better care of myself physically. I started taking my academic more seriously. I started thinking differently about my athletic things I was doing. Started thinking differently about the relationships in my life. Everything changed. I realized that if I'm going to make it on the other side of this pain, I was going to have to stand up to my father. Literally the scariest, hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I told my father, I'd love for you to be in my life, but you can't yell at me, hit me, call me names, or curse at me. And he let me know very clearly that he wasn't willing to obey those 4 rules, so I stopped talking to him. I told him, if you can't obey those boundaries, I won't talk to you. That was 27 years ago or something, 20 years ago, whatever it was. And we still have not communicated. But that's how there's a difference between healthy hard and unhealthy hard. And the hardest thing I've ever done is stand up to my dad and then grieve his loss in my life, even though he was an abuser, even though he was my tormentor. I still grieved his loss because he was my father, and we were no longer communicating. We weren't really talking anymore. And but that was a healthy hard. That was an incredibly hard period in my life, but I couldn't ignore everything around me getting better. And I think that was the first step towards building the life I currently have. The most important thing in a healing journey, it's literally the reason why I became a psychotherapist and why I decided to do psychotherapy the way that I do it, is because more important than anything else is having a destination that is so meaningful to you and so important to you, you'll go through anything to get it. This is not a new human phenomenon. A lot of people do really, really hard things to get something they really want. Like getting a college degree, it's very hard. You got to write a bunch of papers and take a bunch of tests and get a bunch of college credits until ultimately you graduate. But what makes you able to do that, stay up all night studying and get up early, all that stuff, is there something at the end of it that you really want, which is this degree that's going to lead to you getting a better job and making a better living, right? So understanding where you're going, having a destination in mind, allows you to withstand hardships along the journey. And for me, the destination was the day after pain. I wanted to see what that day looked like. And it wasn't even like I knew on the day after pain, I'm going to get this. It was just like, I will discover what the day after pain was like. And I was willing to go through really difficult things to have that happen. So anyone who's in a dark or difficult place, you just have to have that focus, that thing you're trying to get to. And once you identify that, it immediately triggers your resilience, your ability to get through hard things, your ability to be strong. Those things are immediately triggered. And that's really what the healing journey is about. It's about being able to identify those destinations or that thing in your life that you want so badly that you're willing to go through almost anything to get it. What I wanted more than anything else was to discover me. I wanted to know who I was without torment. And by this time I was 19, and I didn't know the answer to that question. I didn't know if I was smart. I didn't know if I was strong. Everything I'd done up until that point was either to please my father or to avoid his wrath. I didn't know who I was in my own ambitions and my own desires and my own wishes. So what I wanted more than anything else was discovery. And that's why I was able to do some really, really hard things to get myself to a position where I could simply find out, who is Elliott? Through that process, I learned to love myself. I learned to like myself. I learned to treat myself well. But my biggest desire, and it wasn't even like, we always think about this, like my biggest desire is I want $1 million or a private jet or rich and famous, whatever. But my biggest desire was I wanted to be able to know who I was. And I was willing to do anything to get it. So if you want to overcome hardships, challenges, depression, anxiety, when you're in a dark place, you got to find that thing that means so much to you that you're willing to go through just about anything to get it.